Thursday, April 20, 2023. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga-Muskogong Island First Nation, Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. And I will move on now to the Indigenous and Human Rights Statement. Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions which, with the aim or effect of depriving them of these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning and working environments that center human rights and equity, and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination.
Sure. That's what I would like to thank trustees Oldfield and Miller, who brought forward SEAC's commitment statement at board meeting on Monday night. We've received a number of emails from staff and a couple of families thanking SEAC for that unified support and the impact that that rang with for those that were hearing it in various corners. So thank you. Thank you to the table for writing it. Thank you to the table for living it. And thank you to our trustees for bringing it forward on behalf of them.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that forward. It means a lot to me. Okay, we are going to move on to item number 4, with which is our roll call. We'll start with the regrets. We received regrets from Trustee Oldfield, from Hannah Nguyen of Easter Seals, Morgan Cameron, member at large, and Kathy Key, voice of deaf and hard of hearing children. Okay, so let's start the roll call now.
John White, Principal at GL Roberts. Tara Kelly, Durham Down Syndrome Association. Elizabeth Daniel, member at large.
Rowan Jarvis, Learning Disability Association, Durham Region.
Kelly Miller, Trustee of HS. Spencer McBrown, Autism Ontario. Shannon Robertson, Principal at Advance.
Michelle Property, Assistant Lead. Lisa Rye, Reporting Secretary. Andrew McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services.
The Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children, and SEAC Chair. Okay, moving on then to our approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the agenda? No? Motion to approve, Spencer Renette. Seconders? Tara Cully, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, moving on then to the approval of the minutes from March 23rd, 2023. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the minutes? Oh, anybody would like to make a motion to approve the minutes? Spencer Renette, seconders? Tara Kelly, all in favor? Motion passed. Thank you. All right, then we will move on to staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Thank you so much. So Michelle will be bringing forward all the information on transitions and our special education planning. My focus this evening is on a bit of a celebration of the release of the grants for student needs with funding from the ministry. So we did experience a little of an anomaly. Our Minister of Education made an announcement on Sunday and then followed it up with table legislation on Monday, Better Outcomes, which is on the provincial floor, and then we'll work with whatever the outcome of that is. But within the grants for student needs, all of the funding information became available to districts earlier this week. So you can imagine actually the excitement of our finance team and being able to dig in and figure that out using the modeling for enrollments for September and begin that work. Budget planning for districts of education are very collaborative in terms of senior team with our teams doing a lot of front end work, but then honoring as well the Education Finance Committee with ultimately trustees being responsible for passing a balanced budget. And so we look forward to those conversations over the next few months. as we work towards that. So this evening, we don't have a detailed breakdown because, as I said, we are in that analysis period as staff, and then we will be bringing forward that analysis to our trustees, knowing that that is a shared leadership of the district in terms of that process prior to anything being decided or going public. But there are a few threads, and I'm happy, hey, good evening. Happy to send this out in an email as well, knowing that a lot of the organizations look to process the highlights of that. So I took a look through the Grants for Student Needs release from the perspective of inclusive student services. So there's a lot of really great components that I read in terms of recommitment to transportation and revision to the transportation funding. There's some changes in terms of capital funding and a few other things, but in a timely way, my heart and head automatically go to special education and mental health supports and services and read through that lens. So one of the announcements comes in the form of a highlight memo, of which there were a few priority items listed, literally as a list. So we were thrilled to see student learning and well-being, mental health, and special education both listed separately within that list as priorities for our current Ministry of Government, so that was great. There's also a strength within the commitments of the Grants for Student Needs that interventions for math and interventions for reading are both present and both also name and attune to students with special education needs included in that. So lots of analysis there for us to do in terms of how we plan for that collaboratively with teaching and learning. There's a recommitment in terms of the inclusive design secondary courses. So lots of great news about building universal design and accommodation within all classes across the district. Specifically for SEAC and your advocacy in terms of special incidents portion. So we've gone through a bit of a cycle with special incidents portion and conversations. So we've gone from individual grant submissions based on a lot of detailed personal information for students shared with parent caregiver permission to at the beginning of COVID for 2 years, we received funding based on a formula application. And this fall, we had returned to a submission per student basis. The ministry is committed to reviewing the process for SIP. They're going to do that through the next school year. But in the meantime, they're going back to the application of a formula for this fall, which means that a lot of staff time, CERTs, administrators, psychological services staff, our facilitators, all of that time that would have gone into the paperwork and process returns to service for kids. So I see that as a really good thing. For our education community partnership programs, we've talked about growth around this table. Growth submits right now twice a year, very detailed by program class, by grade placement of teachers. The ministry's commitment is for that to move to an annual process, which again will turn time back into service for kids as a result. So that was good news. There is a couple project envelopes, so that's kind of the base funding, and then we get into project envelopes. So they kind of equate to when my father-in-law would have an envelope with cash, that's the grocery money for the week. You can only spend it on whatever you write on the front of the envelope. So those are funding pockets, and there are a few. So one of them is the opportunity for districts to submit for removing barriers for students with disabilities. And so we're invited before the end of May to submit. We're going to do some thinking in terms of staff. We're going to look at the recommendations of Right to Read, what the GSN said about supports for reading. We've got some details to still figure out, and then take a look at, is there an application that might fill that any gap there? So we'll be doing that. There's also a developmental disabilities pilot, which is student transitions, and it's application based as well. We're not sure as a district if we would be eligible or not, because we were one of the 2 lead pilot boards for the first 3 years of the pilot. We've taken a pause for a couple of years. It was where our transition coordinator job came out of, and a real amplification of transition to work. So if we're re-eligible to apply, we will throw in as those are dollars for kids. And so we'll take a look at that as a leadership team. There's also a new potential around cooperative education supports for students with disabilities. So we have a strong work education program in Durham. The memo said, and I'm just gonna read it because I don't wanna mess it up. 3-year project launching with the 23-24 school year, and the definition was funding allocations for identified boards will follow. So that won't be us applying for it, but we're hoping to be identified as a participating board. So we'll watch for that. And we're also watching for the details of the announcement around supporting secondary opportunities and supports for students who are deaf, capital D deaf or lower D deaf and hard of hearing. And so we're gonna watch for the details of that. That pot is 200,000 provincially, so my wonder is if it is going to be attributed to the provincial school, and there's support across all districts, but we'll be watching, particularly Michelle and I, as Michelle has the hearing portfolio, where that kind of comes into. And then the final two that I will mention specifically tonight are, we have asked for a longer run commitment at summer supports. And so the GSN's release this week did say, here's your amount for summer 2023. We anticipate this for 2024. So they've given us a dollar amount for this year and then indicated a scaling amount for 2024, which is really good. And again, that gave us supports for students with special education needs. And that amount is $245,000. And summer supports mental health at $600,000. So we'll be figuring that out. We've done some initial thinking as a team. I have, just being fully transparent, I have articulated a concern through School Mental Health Ontario that the $311,000 is greatly appreciated. It is stated as must be spent in July and August and must be used to only extend in-year staff to summer supports. We have 3 years of data as a district that say our kids want a break in the summer and they don't engage mental health supports the same way as during the school year. We've offered some parent caregiver sessions. Again, we see that the rate is very different. So we know we have some students that are really important for continuity of care. We will always uphold that, but my concern is, are we spending where the kids are asking for supports, and we know our in-year needs are extremely high. And so kind of doing that dance, and we'll ask some more questions there. Our mental health team expressed it as when a lot of the mental health needs are exacerbated when you're in an academic situation or a high social situation, you're working and going to school and have family care, that can spike, and in the summer we kind of alleviate. I also use the example of, say, an adolescent working in an hourly job might not be in a position to say, can I take a pause and can I have a quiet room to contact my social worker, because their employment might actually be food stability for their family. So just taking a look at that, we would always do both. Just flagging that money would have given us a lot of flexibility to do the yes and of the school year and summer, but always appreciative of money for student services. So happy to put that into practice. It was just where our kids are telling us when they want service. It's a bit of a different picture, and a few other boards are in the exact same position and express that as well. So just being transparent with SEAC. But again, deeply appreciative that there's $500,000 coming into the Durham board for summer supports for our families. So we'll re-engage the partnership with Ability Center that we did last summer around therapeutic recreation. They're already ready to go. So we'll be confirming up that partnership based on this, and our summer credit learning. We had already made the commitment to including certs, educational assistance in those credit-based programs. This just secures our funding to do so, but as a senior team, we had already said that was really important, that as an inclusive model, we will find it, and in the GSNs it came. So good news all around. So we'll be bringing further update. I know since we're done, Tara, we'll talk in terms of deputation, Eva's chair as well. But as information is available, we'll obviously share around the SEAC table, but really looking forward to the process between senior team and trustees as we co-build a really great model for the 23-24 school year in terms of operationalizing the GSN for kids. So I can take any questions. I will send that out because it was a lot of pockets. So I will send that out to perfect. Well, through.
Perfect, sounds good. Kelly?
I just, thank you so much, Superintendent, I wanted to ask you about the section where you mentioned about the developmental disability pilot. I kind of didn't,
Yes.
yeah, could you explain that a little bit for me?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I forget, it's been a few. I apologize with the tenure in the portfolio, the years kind of blend a little bit now. So it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I was sitting in Michelle's chair at the table at the time. The ministry said, we really want to focus on how do we better serve students who have developmental and or intellectual disabilities in their pathway between secondary and beyond. And so we were able to apply for money, which was enough to pay for a position. And Sade, who many of you have met, came in from one of our schools, great expertise there, and really did some focusing on that integrated transition planning where for the kids, because of DSO and some other funding, we start really early. I would tip to Censor and Ed, we need to explain it further. And so Sade really built up some resources, connections with school teams, connections with community partners like community living. She's very active in terms of consultation with college programs like CICE and that. And so we were one of the 2 co-lead boards. So there was the 2 districts plus about 6 others that moved through a 3-year pilot together. And then obviously allowance in other districts, we stabilized the position. We took our work education coordinator and transition coordinator, combined them and grew the team to 2. So Brayden and Sade each have half the system. They work with Michelle's leadership support. And so now we kind of go, we've stabilized that, but now how do we grow it again? So where the ministry has invited applications, we will take a look to do so. Opportunity and hope that that becomes available to us. But we haven't had a chance to talk with Brayden and Sade yet about where they would want the application to go in, because we would have to identify goals.
Right.
And we don't want to do that without them and the families they work directly with.
Thank you so much. I just thought
You're
once
welcome.
when I heard pilot, I'm like, why isn't it pilot? Like, it sounds like something that should be long term.
A lot of times there is envelope money that goes, districts try this, let's see, we do a lot of reporting, Lisa coordinates a lot of our reporting for us, so we often give a qualitative narrative and a certified financial statement. And then the ideas are gathered provincially, and then where there's common momentum, we will often see that support move into base funding. So one of the examples I would use is we had a pilot for mental health workers in secondary schools for a long time. For us as a district that funded 4 positions between psych and social work. We kept momentum, and the ministry had that sitting out as a project to augment staff, and then I think it was last year that moved into GSN to say we're actually just going to take it level up. So often you'll see trials come as pilot projects, and then where there's stability and ability as well as data, we'll often see that come in. Autism services started as a pilot in an envelope and then moved into base funding. So it's kind of like that process, because the GSNs can change, but they have more of a secured stability to them, I would say, looking at those that have done educations. And so it's kind of that trial, see what can be done, and then we'll anchor it, put some rules to it and move it into the GSN. Or boards are doing it other ways, so it closes and it's done.
Right.
Yeah. Just different pockets, it's a bit complex.
Road?
Thank you. I was frantically taking notes, and I know a lot of this is coming to us.
I'll send it to you.
I missed the one section you referred to the funding pockets with respect to the reading.
Yes, so within the model, and again, we haven't had much of a chance to take a look at it. And I don't want to speak for our finance team without them, senior team, and obviously trustees. But 2 of the kind of common threads that were through were early math interventions and early literacy reading interventions, and how that kind of triangulates with the right to read. And what may come, we know that there was a letter circulated today in terms of reinforcing of the SPC, the K-12 recommendations and how that will play. As an education sector, we know that we're set to get new curriculum effective for September, so that will also play in. Usually the ministry will provide the curriculum in advance, so we can do some training and some look. That right now is under, those that have been consulted on it, that's within a private setting, it's protected. So we know a couple things, but until we see the documents, to know what learning is needed, what resourcing, for our school leaders to do that new curriculum shift. Some information we need to be able to do that to match the dollars to what the need will be for implementation.
And do we believe that the new curriculum will have any aspect of the right to read involved in it?
I haven't been part of any
No, just from-
discussions,
you don't
but we
know,
do sit, so Inclusive Student Services and our teaching and learning team work really closely on the right to read recommendations, because we feel very strongly that the triangulation for any of the recommendations are actually school and classroom team working with teaching and learning coach or facilitator and a speech language pathologist. Because of that, the foundations of oral language, breakdown of language for receptive and expressive. And so we're hoping to be able to continue to keep that kind of triad going in terms of supporting new curriculum, but we'll bring more information. At one point, we brought Lisa Virtue here and she talked about the pilot project a little bit. We've continued that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll get through the budget planning cycle. We'll get the new curriculum, and then in the fall, we'll have that team come back and present to SEAC. I think interactions with all of the organizations, and particularly Learning Disabilities Association, will be really important to get a look at that work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Go ahead.
Okay, it was a follow-up about funding. Just to correct me, wasn't a few months ago when the government said they extended the funding for the tutoring program? Was that only for this year or is it a continuation?
Correct. So I'm drawing a blank. I haven't read the technical paper yet. I have a copy. But I haven't gone in. I was reading special education and reading math.
Yeah.
So I can follow up on that request for
I
you.
just asked because I thought that connected to a reading, like the resources, like it was connected to reading, literacy, like the tutoring would be in school. Like in.
It was, yeah. So right now the tutors, so we had expended all of our dollars as a district by March. And so the tutors, most of them have flipped into supply teacher positions with us through the spring. And we actually have them traveling as groups to release teachers for professional learning. Because we haven't been able to do that up to this point with supply pressures. So all that knowledge is still in schools, and they are learning from classroom teachers are learning from them. But we weren't one of the boards that was going to exercise the extension because we had expended the dollars at that point.
Okay.
The dollars were committed at that point for those roles.
Right.
So, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Adrian.
You're welcome. So good news that we have a chance.
And I just, moving on then to the board report, trustee Miller.
I don't really have anything to report except to say that we had a very intense meeting recently. We're still in the discussion of like same things coming up. We are still very strong and as everybody supports the values that we hold as a board in terms of making sure that we are supporting all the students, that we encourage diversity, that we're also discussing how we can connect with communities in terms of we want to acknowledge all voices. So whether we have agreed or not agreed, the idea is that we want to be able to, whether it's having some community meetings, to have information nights, so that those are the discussions we're having. There are a couple things that are coming up that we're just still in the discussion part in terms of the budget. We have not done anything, so I will come back with that when we have more information. But so far, we're just trying to make sure that we are keeping to the values that we hold. We're clear on that, and that we're also making sure that we are providing adequate information. So a lot of people are, from the community, parents are saying that well, they see this, but they don't understand what it means. So taking that feedback back to us, we are definitely ensuring that we kind of work on some changes to make sure that parents and students are well aware of how to access information at that level. So that's all for my feedback for now.
Any questions? No? Again, I would just like to reiterate what Andrea said, thank you for bringing our message to the board. I was watching the meeting on Monday, and it was very intense, and I think you guys handled yourselves well, under pressure. Everybody stayed calm and collected and managed that situation very well, so. Wanted to put that in there. Okay, if we have no questions, then we will move on to the Inclusive Student Services Department report with Michelle.
Hi, everyone. So I'll just, let's see, oh, there we go. So several things I want to highlight. I don't want to go through the whole department report, but on April 3rd, I'm just going to try and navigate as I talk. Okay, let's start there. On April 3rd, Connor Jenkinson and myself presented in front of board some highlights in regards to special education programming for students accessed through IPRC for next year. Some of the highlights that we did bring to board was some of the pressure points that we saw. So across the district, we continue to experience a trend in the number of students, both existing and new to the DDSB, that require individualized programming, including functional literacy, numeracy, communication skills, and supports for activities of daily learning. And this trend has really been moving upwards in the last couple of years, which really indicates an expansion needed in terms of our developmental and practical learning programs, particularly in the elementary level. The other highlight was in terms of our school support program. Our school support program is an intensive program that provides specific programming skills in terms of literacy, numeracy, and executive functioning. And this program was intended as an intervention, not as a pathway. So as we shift as a board to really incorporate not only equity, diversity, and inclusive design in our courses, we find that at the secondary level that we are moving towards a reduction in the number of SSP, student support programs across the system. So that was also part of our report as well. Just gonna see if I can find where I want to take us. So I would really like to highlight the collaborative partnerships to support transition into school and particularly for our young kiddos. So the Durham Region Infant and Child Development Support to First Time School Start. This is referred to as the ICD program, and it's partners with families to provide early infant and child development program intervention and services, service coordination and resources for children between the ages of birth to school entry. And ICD consultants work with families to enhance the growth and development of children, including those with developmental disability and or who are at risk of developmental delays. 22 children and families have planned transition from the ICD services to school entry for the 23-24 school year. And then the collaborative partnerships to support transition into school Ontario Autism Program, the OAP entry to school program, provides children with access to programming in 6 months leading up to school start. Student information is going to be shared with the district by the end of May. Program currently supporting 190 children within the OAP program and ETS Durham Region Services area. This time last year, approximately 80% of the participants started school within Durham District School Board. And two other highlights that I would like to make in regards to students in gifted programming. We were very fortunate to be able to return as a district to making the connections for students using the virtual platform. So two events for our students. One has already occurred, was on March 7th, and it was called the Think Bold competition. Students from all grades and gifted classes in elementary across the board participated in this virtual event, which was done through Google Classroom and Meet. Each school chose 1 or 2 teams of 4 students in 2 categories to participate in the competition, junior and intermediate. And the Think Ball was really a problem-solving challenge where teams have an opportunity to use creative thinking skills to examine a problem and are given resources and a limited amount of time to come up with a solution given a certain amount of parameters. And then they act on that solution and then actually present. It was an exciting day. I got to kind of sneak in because it was virtual. Everyone involved had a great time. Students were able to connect, which was really, really important. Some of the things that we definitely learned from COVID was the ability to use the technology to allow our students to connect. And the creative ways were amazing to see of how the students analyzed problems that they were given. We have another event that's coming up on May 9th called Poetry Slam. We have a guest speaker that's been invited, and he is a spoken word poet in Toronto, and he will actually be doing a workshop for the students through a broadcast. And then he will be leading a writing workshop for students who will have the opportunity to actually create their own spoken word. Thank you.
Do you know which poet it is?
It is Patrick D. Bella.
I was thinking Dwayne.
I have actually looked him up, amazing. He actually came in a few years ago and the reception was absolutely fabulous. So the students are really looking forward to it. One of the expansions we are looking at, I did want to say, was how we're going to expand it for students that are gifted through IPRC, but in regular class. How can we actually encourage and provide a platform for students through the virtual environment to be able to participate as well? So we are looking into that for next year.
Anybody have any questions with respect to the report? I just have a couple of questions. I'm excited to see these things back, because I know for our gifted kids, a lot of these events are very important, and especially, I love the fact that they're connecting with other schools through these events, through the virtual platform, because I know that makes a big difference for them, especially for the kids in our program. So, and yeah, the challenge around finding ways to enrich the kids who have been identified as gifted through IPRC, but are not taking part in the actual self-contained gifted program I know has been a challenge for a lot of parents over the years. I've had several, reach outs with respect to that, especially from parents in the north who know, especially in high school, because they have the difficulty with the travel and work after school jobs and things like that. So with the virtual platform, I would like to see like more of these kids involved in these programs, because I know there's lots of parents who sort of seek that out or look for that. So are we finding more teachers now reaching out for workshops?
Yes.
For the gifted program, because I know COVID sort of stopped that for a while, but.
So thank you for that question. What actually initiated this was a reach out by teachers to our facilitators, so Lauren Hall. And we did a sort of like an after school drop-in to say where we can actually make those connections. And we thought that the best way to do that would be through the virtual platform, because we don't have to worry about supplies, we don't have to worry about the transportation, and we're able to actually connect the kids quicker. It was amazing how many actually engaged, and then because the first one was so successful, Lauren got so much input, so we put together the second one very, very quickly. The plan for next year is to do at least 4.
Okay.
And then we are in discussions, Lauren and I have been in discussions, how can we reach out for the students, like you mentioned, that are not in the special education classes, are in regular class, how can we actually encourage them to participate? How can we organize that with reference to particularly students in the front?
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. I know that through COVID, there was a virtual sort of, I don't know if there was a resource board.
There was a resource board. Yes.
Is that still being utilized? Is that still-
It's not being utilized as much as what it was during COVID. I think that's on our plan for next year as Lauren and I get together and review what was successful this year. It was her first year in the role this year.
Yeah.
So, we've had a lot of transitions. So, I think just getting her feet wet, she's very, keen and, have made those connections and visited all the programs and spent some time in the programs too to see where the needs were, and what the wants were. She spent a lot of time talking to kiddos. So I'm pretty excited about where the team, meaning the gifted teachers in elementary particularly, where they would like that to go. But one of our concerns is how are we reaching the kiddos that are not in the special education classes,
And that's where
and how to really think of some foundations that we can do in terms of enriching their learning as well.
Yeah, that's good, just because what I was thinking was with the virtual platform, if these schools who, you know, if a CERT has a student they know is identified, that would be a great resource for their teachers within that mainstream classroom to help sort of support their needs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Rose?
One question, thank you. Michelle, it's sort of off topic, but when you say to reach the kids, I think I'm just thinking sort of on a 60-foot level. What method typically works best? I say every situation is different, and I'm wondering in terms of mouthpieces, is it when it comes from the principal, if it comes from the CERTs, if it comes from that specific teacher? What has worked in the past? We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but yeah, like, I don't know, it's a very general question, you might have an answer to it, but I just wondering, like, how do we reach the kids is something that I hear a lot, but I don't know how we do it.
I think it's really being present. One of the things that I really encourage, and I know Connor does as well, our instructional facilitators, what's really important is that they're present in the classrooms, and then they're really, and we're present as well too. So Connor and I have made a real effort to get out into the classrooms and see the variety of classrooms that are there. And I always enjoy, as a secondary person, I love going into kindergarten. Initially, it was very little chairs, but totally love that opportunity when I really need to and feel that too distant and really want to get back into the classroom. I have a tendency to go to kindergarten, and the joy, right, that you see in the joy of learning. And I think making those connections and seeing that, and also being open to having the conversations to see where we need to fill the gaps. For example, particularly in gifted, and having those conversations with community members that have reached out to myself, knowing that as a system lead, gifted is one of my portfolios, as well as I hear DHH, as well as vision as well. So I think making those connections as much as possible. One of the things that I think we really did learn in terms of COVID is the connection that technology can provide for us in making those connections quickly. So I think a lot of us have incorporated, and a lot of teachers have incorporated the virtual and the technical platform with also the in-person as well. And I know for myself and for Connor, we're able to be many places that we weren't able to be before, and be present, although there's nothing like walking into a school, it's lovely. So those connections. The other things that we've really put into play this year is our CERT e-bulletin. So our CERT e-bulletin is a information bulletin that goes out to all our CERTs within the system, elementary and secondary. And we have information pieces in regards to hot topics, we have strategies, and then we have upcoming events across the entire ISS team to make sure that the information is getting out. And that the CERT e-bulletin is actually linked in our ops, our administration ops, which goes to the administrators as well. So making those connections that way have been really important, and getting the feedback of what is needed within the CERT bulletin and how we actually create and morph that as we move forward. And all members of the ISS team contribute to that. So I think providing those opportunities are important as well to get information pieces out. But again, I think the most important thing is being present within those classrooms and hearing from administrator colleagues about where they hear the need is. But I like going in and talking to little kids, and they will tell you exactly what is up. So, and that's where we can actually fill that need and support, and that's what we do. So, I know that's a broad question, I know I gave you a really broad answer, but,
Exactly.
but for me, kindergarten.
Okay, thank you.
This is a question or maybe a reflection. I did remember our director talking about the camp that's coming up, the DIAC. DIAC camp, yeah. So this was new to me because this is my first year, so. Is there any connection? Can you talk about like a little bit about that? Because here on the site, it's saying that it's for students with a passion for music, visual art, and theater and dance.
So it's
no arts.
Durham Integrated Arts Camp.
Yeah,
correct?
so I'm part of the planning supports for the arts camp, so we used to run it in June, but there was conflict for say our grade 12s finishing, and things like that, so we moved to a September model. And the kids, it's basically a school that we open for a week a year, grades 7 to 12, it runs on the secondary period model where the students or campers have 4 periods, 2 in their major, 1 in their minor, and 1 elective. Half the staff are DDSB teachers and half the staff are artists that make their living based on their profession in one of the areas of the arts, including dance, photography, all kinds of mixed media, music, drama, thank you, I'm gonna get it in. And all the students go out, they stay over, it is a fully overnight camp. We have grown in our support in terms of that being an inclusive program. So over the last couple of years, we have augmented with special education staff. So camp this fall is planned to have a minimum of 2 educational assistants as well as 2 child and youth support workers supporting the camp. And we've been able to plan for one of our realizations last year as we were coming out of COVID, the camp had all new campers, which was unusual or mainly new because kids had missed a few years. Whereas normally there's a bit of a 10-year and leadership track for some of the students. And so the nurses station was quite busy, but a mix of physical health and mental health well-being. And so for camp this September, we're actually splitting the 2. And I know health is health and we often come in that conversation. But we do feel that the student that needs the kettle of warm water or some kind of sensory calming space is different than the student who needs support with their medications or has a physical need for a nurse. So we are separating, and the camp staff has designated the nursing station and what we're currently calling the chill hub. So we're taking over the camp library, and it will have a kettle and sensory materials, and that will be the home base for the children and youth workers to kind of work out of and have that space for kids. And the educational assistants will largely be in the program classes, supporting accommodation needs such as gross motor, mobility, the how do I get around, or do I need to just come out of a loud space? Right. But it's quite something. The students who attend, you see such an incredible, there's no base skill that you need. They grow the kids wherever they are in the skill set of the area that they pick to engage in. And it's just incredible what comes at the end of camp in terms of the skills of the kids.
Yes.
I
think,
Yeah,
it's
it's a very special place.
I'm very surprised, like I was talking about, I never heard it, and so my big thing is, I guess, like a lot of times, you know, they do get sent home or there is information, but I feel there's always groups that don't hear or enough about it. You know, like when I talk to the community members or families, like, oh, I didn't know this is coming up, now it's too late to apply. So definitely, you know, figuring out ways to let, you know, families are really, because I kind of feel like in the past, I mean, I haven't been here, but I know in other, some of these programs kind of feel very, it's like the same kids go every year and it's kind of like, it's, you know, there's not that sense of openness, but of course, this is different. I'm glad I asked because I know that they have a special needs supports as well, right? So I've never.
Yeah, we'll be growing. The camp isn't fully accessible, but they've been making a lot of gains that way. And so we'll take your feedback back. It runs through student success, through Superintendent Neville's. He has the arts portfolio. And so together with the facilitator for the arts, and our facilitator for sports and rec, the camp gets constructed. There's a lot of Durham educators that spend many months, volunteer time in the evenings and weekends putting camp together. but we'll take the feedback back through superintendent levels.
And just a quick clarification, I read that it said grade 7, if the child's going into grade 7, so they can apply.
As a grade 6 now for grade 7 in September. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And that was a bit of a shift,
Yeah.
because prior to COVID, we had grade 7s that were 5 minutes away from being grade 8s. And with the shift to September, we have grade 7s who were grade 6s not too long ago. So it has kind of shifted. But the camp staff are incredibly responsive to what that needs to do in terms of planning. It also, as it does inspire student leadership across all grades, feed that back into our elementary and secondary schools. And leaders, like Shannon and Dawn, can leverage that within student voice and choice and leadership in their schools during the school year.
It's communicated through school, our school communications, as well as promoted from our arts teachers, whether that be music or visual arts teachers. So it's kind of, when we know that the information is ready, we send it through school communication, but then our teachers who teach those arts send it through their classroom as well. And then on top of that, those kids that have a keen interest in those different areas, we all often tap them on the shoulder and say, don't forget about this, don't forget about this, don't forget this. So there's kind of multiple ways that is brought to the families, at least from the elementary, and I'm assuming it's the same.
Yeah, and we also have our guidance team who also help support kids who, because I think the application's done online as well, so that we have our guidance team who help support the application. In some areas, there's support for families to help with the application program as well. In our area, we also offer supports for funding to help fund if somebody wants to go, and it's financially is something that they're, feel that they can't do, we help with that as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it, even though I'm not going.
And I'll just add to that, as a parent whose child's attended SEAC, she can say enough good things about it. She's a very happy and learns a lot. And, you know, she went for visual arts and she's doing integrated studio art right now. So it's a great program. If you know people who are interested in that, definitely something they should look into.
Okay, so this is a really great diet. It's a great turn, I'm sorry, this is really cool. So Andrea, one of the things that we had sort of talked about, there was the changes that we were making in the IEP, we were actually talking about interests.
Yes.
One of those things, like, this is a really great opportunity, if my kid is interested in music or what
It's
have you.
fantastic.
Fantastic, this is great, we've got this great camp available, we should go check that out. Cause I understand that things come through the SEAC and come through the newsletter, to be completely frank, I never look at those, cause those aren't targeted at my child. So if that's the only way that information is ever communicated to me, I'm not getting it,
That's really important feedback for us.
right? So I don't look at that because it doesn't apply to me, it applies to the neurotypical kids, 99% of the time.
And I think that's really important, sorry, can I?
Yeah.
So I think what you've also, so thank you for the comment and the question. I think that is a direct example of why it's really important that our administrator associations have representation around this table. Because what will happen, as I imagine, and looking at both my colleagues, what will happen is we sit with the administrator groups regularly, and there's an opportunity for administrators to send questions through liaison, but also for us to have conversation and consult and get some information out colleague to colleague. And so I'm looking at Shannon and I'm looking at Dawn as representatives for elementary and secondary. And that narrative, if you don't mind them carrying and borrowing your story, is really important feedback for colleagues in how they craft, both in terms of experiences at school with the related communication, and who views and receives that as authentic invitation for participation. So I would leave that with Shannon and Dawn back through the two associations, and then that will school-based to school-based, really important feedback.
I will sometimes, sorry, just to follow that, I will sometimes get a note from his teacher, that says, by the way, you might wanna look at this is important, but that's if they know about it, if they understand that, or the implications, or this is open to your kids as well. There has been some of that's feedback that I've heard from parents that I say, oh, I saw it, I didn't know my kid could attend. So I just ignored it. First, so that accessibility and the inclusiveness part, we probably should really hammer home on that as well, say everybody's welcome.
They're on it.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's the, yes, done, and, yeah, very good.
Yes, I
Just
can.
because I don't want to keep this too long. It was just to confirm, it's, the application is fully closed, so there's no more waitlist, time, right?
I haven't been, I've been doing the staff planning, I haven't been involved, so I would have to check to answer your question.
And then the other question was, I wasn't clear if it was for art students or just it was just more encouraged for the art.
It's focused on the arts in terms of the programming at the camp.
But not from school, it was from the, like, in terms of introducing it to students at school, like, it can be all students, right? Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, okay, then we are going to move on to item number 9, which is the proposed SEAC meeting dates for the 23-24 school year. And Lisa sent us a calendar. Yeah, this, with the dates. I like my stack of stuff. Beautifully color coded with the staff holidays and the draft DDSB calendar holidays, because the calendar hasn't been approved yet by the ministry for next year. And the proposed SEAC dates. And Andrew, there's two dates we are looking at, different dates for, right? These November and May.
Yeah, so November is, we had to put it earlier because of the parent-teacher conference.
Parent-teacher interviews, okay?
And then May, it would fall the day before the May long calendar. From May.
Maybe an issue, okay, so that's why those dates are not, typically we aim for the third Thursday of every month, but there is, and there's also stuff going on in November with respect to awards and things that trustees have to attend, right? That's not just, like, I think the volunteer distinction and that type of thing happens in November.
I always move to school days.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at those dates? And does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the dates? Then can we get a motion to approve the SEAC dates for next year? Sarah, seconders? Rowan, all in favor? Okay. All right,
Sorry, I had a question, not regarding specific dates, but just to what we had discussed, one of our meetings, I think Andrea, you had shared about the changes for kind of being flexible, the flexibility in the calendar for the students and moving things around for the weeks. I think it was, I don't remember, but you had talked about the flexibility, and what I was thinking is because when we're doing our presentation, that would have been an interesting piece to have in the package to kind of discuss from the SEAC and what are the things that we're doing to support students, especially with the calendar aspect, because I was like, oh, I don't have that reference in, to share with the board, so.
Thank you. So I think, was it this Monday or 2 Mondays ago, we made a commitment for, more, for different aspects of community consultation on the 24-25 calendar. So I'll take that back through Jim and we'll make sure, that the consultation plan for the following year calendar, that we're able to bring SEAC's voice through.
Okay, so those are not set from the previous year, I thought those were things that were already, that was just.
So the 23, 20, oh, was that just the example? The
Yeah,
summer
it was for
period?
this, yeah, it was like, you had it color coded for what there would be changes, so like you saw the dates where, I think even with like staff, it would be in terms of like where the students would have different things, like less, tests or.
I have to go back.
I'll go
I'm
back,
trying-
but it was very relevant
And you
because
emailed.
those were supportive aspects of trying to adjust and, make sure our students are accommodated without the extra pressures of the things that we have to, that kind of flexibility.
I'll write down to make sure about SEAC through in the consultation development, in a bit more elevated way prior to the design of the calendar.
Yes.
But if you think of the specifics, please
Yes,
email me.
and you gave it to us, so I have that, it just wasn't a part of our.
I'll have to go back, sorry.
Okay, I'll go back time later.
Sorry.
I think it was on the draft count when we brought the draft dates here.
Yes.
I might be able to do it tonight. Take a look back a month.
Our open discussion period, I don't think we have anything specifically planned.
Yeah.
Oh, CX section, right, sorry. The CX section of the special education plan that was sent through to us. I know there are changes, I don't know if everybody's read it or not.
I just sent it.
Just sent it today, yeah.
I did that.
Yeah, I did, a quick highlight of it, but that's all. I know that we've changed how,
The changes made were based on SEAC's comments. I took the comments from here and just moved them in. And so the only two changes from the current year special education plan are the amendment to the gallery being through live streaming. And that I had added a communication point that SEAC meetings are communicated through the Durham board social media accounts. And then the board report that indicated about the SEAC survey going out, and how our intention is to use it both in terms of informing the development of parent guardian resources from SEAC as well as consultation to the board, has just been added at the bottom to say we are doing a survey and that's our intended use of it, is what's added, but maybe if you don't mind, just if somebody's got a question, if they can take a peek at your copy.
yeah, sure. Does anybody need a copy? I have a copy right here, if you want to take a look at it.
Sorry.
Closet will be a little look.
I tried to print it.
Okay, all right, now that everybody's had a chance to take a look at this, at the SEAC portion for the spec ed plan, can we have, are there any questions or concerns with respect or feedback with respect to it? Do we have a motion to approve? Councilor Net, seconder, Rowan, all in favor? Okay, motion is passed. And one more thing before we move on.
So as we've been reflecting as a leadership team, just on the titling of the special education plan, so the regulation requires us to publish a special education plan with certain sections. We absolutely value that transparency with our community, which is why we do it annually, although the requirement is biannual. But reflecting in the content, because the regulation is quite, has had a history to it in terms of its lifespan. When we look at the document, as a leadership team, we don't feel that special education plan is a reflective title of the full content as we add mental health supports alongside special education supports. And the language we've talked around in terms of special education. We always say strengths and needs, but in terms of the community, and we really value the transition the district made a number of years ago to change the department from special education to inclusive student services. So when you look at our department title, having inclusion, having our students named and services, we feel that the department title name is actually more reflective of the contents of the commitments within the document. And so just in case there's any concern from SEAC, the title this year will be Inclusive Student Services from the Durham District School Board, but the special education plan, so that if any family or organization Google's DDSB special education plan, the document will still flag for all the readers on the internet, but really feel that it's important to have student on the cover as our core. And then, as I said, the other wording around it. So just didn't want to make the change without consulting with SEAC. If there were any concerns with that, also to provide you the background. But this is, if you're okay with it, that would be how we cover it for this year.
I have a question. I did one school visit, right? And they had like an officer for, but I'm confused. I'm just a little confused. I think it was for students who are, they may be, like they're at the age of 18, but they're kind of in a special program. Does that come under,
It may be us and it may be student success depending on the program.
Oh, because that's what I wanted to clarify, like making sure that there's a confusion of but it's under one umbrella of inclusive student services. Is that-
We are through the programs and services through our department, but there's a lot of work that happens in student success, which is curriculum, teaching and learning,
Okay.
to support multiple pathways too. So it would depend on, we try not to silo. But if there's a specific kind of who is that attached to or guided by, you can let us know and we're happy to bring that. It's just the work of accessibility and inclusion occurs in every department. This plan speaks to that, which is attached directly to the department work
That you're under.
and comes under the special education funding and budget approved at a district level.
I was just asking because I'm thinking of the same thing, like basic search, like when parents going to find and just making sure, because even sometimes on the web, it's like you have to go to one thing to another thing and you get kind of lost in. Just making sure that connection is, because they're gonna be used to what they're used to before, right? So.
Yeah, and that's why we keep both. We often debate it within our, like, what's inclusive, what's special education. From a school level, we've kept a lot of staff titled with special education. And that's been intentional a little bit because once we get into a school level, say our special education heads are Bachelor of Education specialist teachers who are not regulated health professionals, such as when we come into the department, when it's inclusive and integrated, it actually requires that variety of roles to say that's part of the integrated team. So we have kind of kept them distinct and separate so far. And a lot of our processes, like individual education plans and placements, will use the language of special education because if a parent or caregiver or student goes to connect that with provincial resources, that language of special education is still very strongly dominated within funding, programs, legislation. And so we don't want to disconnect
Right.
that's actually part of our core. But we want to live students at the center, right, in the experience.
Awesome, thank you for
You're welcome.
Great, any other questions? Okay, moving on to the business arising from the minutes, and I'm gonna hand you to talk about the survey timeline.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, I wanna do that first.
So I believe last month we published the period of time that the survey would be over, would be published. Our communications team is working on flyers and social media clips, so we'll bring all of that to May SEAC as well. It was interesting because we thought we had the survey fairly finalized, and we thought we'd do a last check through our speech language team for as communication experts on, can you read this from the receiving end before we send it for translation? And so we do have some suggestions in simplifying the language. Education has a lot of edu jargon. And so Lisa, who leads that team, she'll be here next month too for speech language hearing month. Went through it, and there's a lot of ways that we phrase things in elongated sentences, and Lisa was able to trim them up. So the intent will stay the exact same, but the language accessibility and therefore the translations will tighten. So for example, I already noted that I'm using too many words to describe the changes to condense. So within the survey, opportunity to comment on your answer. She's just like, put comment. They'll understand when it's a box. So we're gonna make some of those changes. We still had it at 22, 23. I just said to Eva before SEAC, it's 2023 now, and we're gonna use the data in 2023. Can we just flip it to 2023? So we're gonna make some of those changes. And then when the survey is made available, we are having it pre-translated into the 6 languages in addition to English. So 7 languages, it will be available. Those top 6 are based on our last student census. And so frequency of languages spoken by our families such as Farsi and Urdu. I don't have a list right in front of me, but so we're gonna do that in advance and have that available because we feel quite strongly that when we're asking parents and guardians to share of their experience of their children, that we provide opportunity to do so in first language. And so we'll take a look at that and we'll bring everything back as a full package to SEAC in May. At that point, we'll need to consider it finalized because it will be publicly shared shortly thereafter. And we need time for our administrators to understand who it's being directly sent to and things like that. So it will go to all families with a student review through IPRC direct send because it's feedback on IPRC communication based on all the set here. So we'll work on that, but we do have some tweaks if that's okay. If SEAC is okay with staff taking the intention and just making sure that the accessibility of language, we put it through an accessibility reader for grading reading level today, and it came out at a grade 11. And the general premise for communication with community for accessibility is to hit like a late junior, early intermediate at most. And so we want to make sure that we get it to a version where that's where it's scoring, so that we can make sure from a time perspective, language, translation, that the intentionality of words and translation are holding, and that the survey is reflective of the invitation for input from all.
That's me. Does anybody have any concerns with respect to that?
I think the department knows more about that than I would be able to provide any feedback. It's just
We're learning.
I feel when we have an expert in a speech path, we should probably leave her.
Right.
I just wanted to know if, how will it be sent to the parents?
Direct send. So we use our IT department to send through our messenger system. But we'll also ask certs to make sure with families or classroom teachers. It depends where the student learns and who's in greatest connection with them, to make sure receipt or if a print copy is needed. And then be following up with our administrators in any of their communications as well. And then if there's any, it's set up to be electronic return. But if there's any paper copies coming back, they'll come back through our certs and administrators to us that way. I like the paper copy.
Because accessibility aspect.
Yeah, we find with, individuals that use text readers or have vision impairments, on-screen is preferred because the technology does the accommodation, so there's no change in experience for them. That they can set up to have their accommodations preset, in terms of that, but we like to provide it in both just in case. Same thing, you can see that I went to paper copy to edit, so, very much so.
Thank you. Okay, and other business, arising from the minutes, I just want to confirm that I emailed, a feedback regarding their request for membership on SEAC, with respect to naming an alternate. I have heard nothing back. I know that we had emailed them a couple of times before bringing that request to SEAC, asking them to provide an alternate. So hopefully, I'm assuming we haven't heard back from them because maybe they don't have anybody that they can name at this time. Hopefully, they can find somebody, because I think it would be a great voice at our table. But we have to comply with the regulations, unfortunately. So,
In regards to membership as well, Hannah will be notifying, but she has let us know that, due to a variety of commitments, she needs to step away from the table, at this time, so I believe they're working through finding a replacement member and will communicate that directly with you.
okay, that's good to know. Do we know if our alternate will be able to attend? She's gonna, okay. All right,
And she's gonna firm up.
fair enough, fair enough. Okay, SEAC camp, that was set to get around again in a Word link for everybody to take a look at that handbook, provide any comments and feedback.
I wrote my comments on a paper napkin and handed them to Andrea and thought it was.
They're upstairs, yeah.
Oh, excellent, well, that's good, okay. And we received some from Morgan,
Oh, great.
and I sent, they went through as well too, right? And to my, and I went through some of it today. I think there are some things here I think we should highlight just to our group to actually just take a look at. New members, I highly recommend you take a look through the guide as it stands, because there's a lot of great information here on SEAC, how SEAC runs, expectations, kind of, what our role is, how we promote ourselves, things like that are great, plus some information on what, what the board's role is in providing us with supports and things like that, and what we we should be commenting on each year or looking at. So I highly recommend everybody actually take a really good look at that. A couple of things that I know that I highlighted that I thought I wanted to mention here, was the reference in here to ongoing professional development to members of SEAC, and providing SEAC with a scheduled professional development from the board. Because I think there's probably a lot of professional development that goes on, especially related to spec ed, that there would be of interest. Yeah, sorry,
Right, and then Michelle jumped in, or Shannon done. So with COVID, we've had to dial back from professional learning kind of sessions. And until supplies and keeping classes open, we're kind of getting through that. But also from a research perspective, withdrawal and large chunks of time don't have the same impact on practice as job embedded learning. And so a lot of times what we're doing is sending coaches to work alongside teachers right within their classrooms individually, rather than doing the large room sessions that SEAC was previously used to being invited to. So we're currently reevaluating professional learning as a district, but trying to move as much to job embedded learning as possible, knowing that kind of bite size with coaching for implementation and follow-up makes the biggest difference to practice. Also too, we know that our administrators are leading school learning plans. And so a lot of time the learning is nuanced and specified to the school based on policy and practice, indigenous rights, human rights, equity. And so a lot of times our leaders are working with central staff to design what that looks like, sounds like at the school level, such as creative practitioner inquiry. And I don't know if you want to speak to how you're growing your staff learning at school levels from, but we've really reduced our withdrawal and come out, get for 2.5 hours or 5.5 hours and go back. And we also knew that that was largely individual departments, and then we were leaving educators to put all the pieces together. So state schools would pull out, inclusive student services would pull out, curriculum would pull out, and educator would go to class and say, I don't know how they fit together. And so what we're trying to do is support on an integrated way so that it actually meets the needs of the educator. But I would turn to Dawn and Shannon for how they are leading other schools.
So I'll use my school as an example in that job embedded learning. Not only do we have coaches or facilitators coming in and working with staff, I also have staff that have an expertise in certain fields, doing something very well, and so they're mentoring another staff member, and so I might release them as a team, one staff member to shadow the other or to co-plan, co-learn together on something, whatever that inquiry is, to help provide for the students sitting in the seat or the students in that classroom, all fitting under the umbrella of our school plan all around inclusive, equitable, and Indigenous education. So as an example, from a SEAC perspective, we have a teacher who has a very strong background in special education, particularly around autism and students, they're learning that way, and what's working with these students, that she is working with a colleague on how to implement this for the student in that classroom and what we can do, and it's going really, really well. I've released my kindergarten team recently to go learn from a teacher who is leading a lot of Indigenous learning in the education classroom. And they were blown away and made some really amazing changes within their classroom that is making a positive impact on the students in that class. So it's very much job embedded, and it's really impactful. So
from our athletic perspective too, is we have department heads where we meet with department head teams, so we're actually having our department heads do a lot of the support with the professional development. And then that does come along with that job embedded piece because the departments are working together in a small group, but then they're also, the heads are mentoring and supporting their members of the department. So it's a little bit more, with more job embedded pieces. We do professional development from a school-wide perspective. We use our staff needs for that. So at least we're still doing both, larger scale professional development, but also job embedded. And we do invite everybody to come in who's wanting to come in and work alongside with our team, including our active teachers as well. So we're using both because as Holly said, it's very much more, or I shouldn't say very much, but it's more productive, I find, and it lands better with there is that coaching or piece that happens. with
Including the
professional
students
development. Yeah.
and bring it back full circle to your question about the right to read, if I may. That is a very engaging, interesting, and moving forward topic among administrators and among staff. It is a daily thing, conversation / action happening in school, even though the new curriculum has not come out. So back to that thinking, my entire primary division has been working on professional development alongside literacy coaches around what literacy instruction is with the right to read and what do we need to shift, what shifts are we making, and it's exciting. And we're seeing and working with our tutor that we had until the end of March, we saw some very positive impactful actions happening with those students, and we've seen some great movement in terms of, in my school, we worked with grade 1 and 2 students, specifically who had some significant gaps, and that tutoring and that focusing on some of those phonological awareness, we looked with our speech and language pathologist, we made some really big gains in terms of their reading instruction, their reading skills.
And I think that's a really good example too, because what's being co-constructed between district team, like system level staff and school staff, is a whole literacy launchpad online. And so school staff will say, we need to know more about, and then the district staff working with lead teachers will develop it, put it into the launchpad, and now it's available to every educator in the district. And that resource keeps changing, which is why it's an online tool. It's moving with our learning.
Sorry, I have to repeat that, it's a system, what's it called?
It's a literacy launchpad, and so it's kind of a go-to place, for the kind of inquiry and learning and questions and wonderings related to practice shift, because Right to Read tells us there's a lot of really great things in literacy instruction. There's a few things that we need to pay attention to differently. So it's building on good practices and filling in a little bit. It's not a dramatic shift, but an adjacent move too. And so the Launchpad is available 24/7 to staff. So as teachers have prep release at different points of the day, it's available to them during those times, or if they're sitting in collaboration, as Shannon said, it's available to them as a resource. But the team that kind of takes care of the updates is constantly doing that based on school team feedback and learning alongside them.
It's why I love my job. Honestly.
I mean, I guess my point, or I guess what I'm looking at here is many of these resources are actually, or these sessions are actually great information for SEAC members even to take back to their association, what's happening in the classrooms, right? And also getting experience as well, right? So that's before we used to have access to some of the PD so that we could learn what the staff is learning as well. And it helps SEAC members along the way learn how to use, what's behind using the assistive technology, what types of programming is being used for speech and language, things in and around that. So that's one thing I'd like to see kind of open back up to see whether it's access to some of the online PD that people can watch on their own time, which would probably be very convenient for CF members, right? To watch some of them online. I'm sure there's lots you can't just open up, correct? But there are things I'm sure that that would be beneficial to the.
We can also shape that within what presentations come forward to SEAC. So I'm thinking we may have our administrators highlight how they lead and maybe bring a couple staff to share that. And then definitely your comment about SLP, this is coming next month. And then around technology, Connor leads our inclusive tech team.
Yeah.
And so maybe they can, we can get the two facilitators to come and do a demo on some recent updates. But maybe we'll do that in September.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I really like what I heard about the teacher peer learning or the mentoring of staff. I love that. I just was wondering, is that something more on a voluntary basis? How does that structure? I kind of wasn't clear in terms of.
You can speak to
Yeah,
that.
sure.
So as a school, so once we've established what our school plan is, which is based on a whole bunch of data and sources and all that's kind of based, then as a leadership team within my school, we may see where that learning need is, but really that no understanding, it's kind of nuanced, because I'm also meeting with all of my staff around what their learning plan is. And how does that learning plan align with the school learning plan? And when we have that in place, all of a sudden I also notice that these three staff have a similar plan.
Right.
Well, that works well in, let's say for my kindergarten team, for example, they all had a very similar plan. They work very closely with each other. So then coming forward, we say, okay, what are some of the learnings you're interested in? I have a colleague who at this school who has, this is happening in their kindergarten class. Are you interested? And so it's a partnership. It's guided, it's in a lot of places, it's where, okay, I see, you know, we have my junior division is really working on math. That has been kind of a goal as a division. And working with those individual teachers, they again had some were a little bit different, but some nuances, so then I touch base with my facilitator. This is what we're seeing as a need, how can we support? We bring that to the team. So it's very much led by admin in collaboration, right, with staff. I'm thinking the secondary is similar.
Yeah, but just an example, we have some teachers that are doing gradeless assessment, right now, and they're providing grades for like our midterm and the final, and so it's been phenomenal. It starts out, it's a little bit, you know, as I said, it does start out with a little bit of extra work, but they're finding that the success that we're seeing with the kids and the student success is just exponential, because the students know where they're at. So what we've done is now this small team who has been really honing their skill at this assessment, they're now actually sharing it with other staff and providing opportunities. So, and that's where we use our staff meetings. So instead of them listening to me talk for an hour, it's, okay, let's get together in groups, because these experts in this new assessment strategy, they're gonna work with this group, and the same thing when we're doing student identity work. We will bring in the experts in the building to actually do the work, and to show how they're embedding this CCPI work within their classroom, how they're embedding specific forms of student identity within whether it's using a resource, and this is how they're landing it on the desks of the students. So this is kind of how we're bringing those experts in to do that work, instead of it just always being us speaking, right? It's good to have the additional voice at the table, right?
It sounds so awesome, I love it, because I think on the practical, like on just, you know, on the home-based level, people, at least when we have our meetings, or major meetings, they want to see that collaboration, want to understand how is it working, not just kind of at the end of it, we just present, right? We want to see the inner work, so that's awesome. Thank you so much.
I guess the only kind of other comment I had brought, and I sort of had a quick discussion with Andrew with respect to the, back on page 38, with respect to some of the DDSB documents that have been, you know, referred to in this document are very old, like 25 plus years old. So, we were talking about updating that, and also maybe, you know, sort of focusing on documents for SEAC and things that, you know, would be useful for SEAC and for our communities. And also looking then at updating that with respect to what's going out to teachers, resources going out to teachers, because some of this is for teachers, right? And like school team manual was last revised in 2009. I'm assuming
We've
there's.
done it since.
Oh, it hasn't updated yet. So, yeah, I assume many of these documents would no longer comply with AODA or right to read or anything, so. If you guys haven't taken a look at it, you probably should take a quick look. There's lots, especially our new members, for you to read in there that I think would be really helpful for just around the table, and providing Andrea and Lisa with the comments for revision on that. Okay?
Does a quick question?
Yeah.
This might come later on, but when, there's a section under retaining your effectiveness that says request to visit programs and placements, can you give me, someone explain that to me? That's under this is for our handbook, it says request, under retaining for effectiveness, request to visit programs, placements for exceptional students.
And then I'll hand it over to you. I, as the representative for the Association for Bright Children, I have, and it hasn't happened through COVID, but prior to COVID, would attend many of the gifted orientation sessions that happen at the different schools. And the last year, and COVID cut it abruptly short, but we were actually, Andrea, myself, and our gifted facilitator were actually touring the classrooms as well. And seeing what was happening in the classrooms at those schools.
Yeah, so that is
So it's not just like everybody would say, okay, I wanna go to visit, like it's not like. Okay.
No, but if there is an interest for what do those kind of strategies look like, or for instance, Easter Seals or their developmental and practical learning programs, we can arrange for a couple program visits. We just are very transparent with families if somebody's coming into a classroom who's not normally part of the classroom team, so that communication is there on the intention and access. And then it would be with one of us going out, and then hosted by one of our administrators.
And I attended one of the speech language pathology meetings.
Yeah, so where there's interest, all you have to do is email us and we can make arrangements.
I wasn't sure, thank you so much.
So, yeah, perfect, thank you. Yeah, so, and, you know, the classrooms are great to visit. I have to say, the kids are always so excited to see something different. They really are. Does anybody else have any questions with respect to the business arising from the minutes?
I do, 1 second.
Okay.
You can do this.
Okay, yeah,
expose the resource communication.
Oh, that's right, yes. Since we're gonna just actually had to pop out, she has a hard end time at 8 o'clock. But she did circulate with everybody this resource for connecting with your school team, and specific around Autism Ontario, but there's a lot of good resources on here for everybody, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be related to autism, but there's some great resources here, so should take a look at that. Tara, you had a question?
Sorry, I had one other thing to bring up for business relevant for the minutes, but I need that on counterpart.
Right.
So I wanted to just at least make sure she had to leave. We had originally talked about doing public deputation for the budget, but given that we literally just got the GSN numbers this past week when I was, Kristen and I were emailing back and forth about going to do the deputations, because I don't have anything. I found out there was actually a second deputation night on May 31st. So I'm gonna do that, because now we're actually gonna have more information, we'll actually have information from finance, we'll have some stuff. The only thing that I wanted to sort of maybe bring forward is that I was going to take a look at everything sort of beforehand and then bring the presentation to the next meeting in May, because it is just before our, the public deputation timeframe, so I don't wanna sort of start gathering information, I wanna present it, and then just so can I have some space next month?
Yeah.
To, we can add to that,
discussion
so for feedback and things, I'll try and.
Open discussion period, yours.
Yes, please.
Perfect, yeah. Perfect. Okay, moving then on to correspondence. We did receive correspondence from the Ontario Public School Boards Association with respect to consultation on the update of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It's quite a lengthy letter. And I think this is something that maybe we should read and digest a little bit and see if we wanna comment on, but there's some highlights in here, they sort of refer to, one of the main suggestions is there be a section in the AODA that refers specifically to special education, because that's currently not a section within that act, within that legislation. But also, you know, they're talking about, you know, the Ontario Human Rights Commission right to read and the recommendations of the K to grade 2 screening recommendation that I guess is contained in that, as well as the K to 12 education standards development that was developed and the report provided to the ministry a couple of years ago. For which we've still had there's been still nothing from the government on adopting those recommendations. Some of those recommendations it's just kind of been crickets on that. There's still no indication when the ministry will implement that. And it talks about the accessibility standards, you know, related to obligations around duties of accommodations, funding for built environments, ministerial coordination and communication planning, professional learning, you know, sort of all sorts of stuff that all, in order to implement, take funding. And there's still no indication of dedicated funding for that. Or any timeline when anybody might be expecting sort of information from the ministry on that adoption. So I don't know if this is something we want to, as a SEAC, you know, sort of read and sort of formulate a response or a letter to the ministry in respect of supporting the comments from the Ontario Public School Board Association or providing our own recommendations on that. But the letter came in late, so it's sort of hard to do that at this meeting, but maybe it's something that we really take a look at for next meeting, because this, the updates to the acts only come up so often, and this is a huge, really important piece of legislation in the province for protecting people with disabilities, with rights of people with disabilities, so. Yeah, Does Donna still sit on off stuff?
If Donna is on also, yeah, she is.
She's still on.
Yes.
Yeah, she
Would
still sits.
she be able to come to a meeting to talk about the language? Because
For this section of the AODA stuff.
the whole OPSPA, like the
The
letter is from OPSPA,
I'm
right?
wondering if we can ask,
To participate in some questions we could specifically, because there's a lot of very specific language in here in terms of that, like, what did you mean by this statement? Maybe I'm wondering if that might be something, would she be able to?
Maybe she had to, she's part of some experience, maybe you could just ask her, I'm not sure what committees or what, how deep she's in, but I think that would be reasonable to ask her.
yeah, I would, knowing Donna, she'd probably be, if she's able to, she'd probably be happy to come and talk about it.
Just some of the language in terms of that's there right now, I scroll past the page 12.
So for new members on SEAC, a few years back, there was a subcommittee of SEAC that reviewed, sort of went through and reviewed the original sort of draft report of the K-12 standards. And what that was a document that was to put recommendations to the ministry with respect to standardizing special education across the province, because right now it's kind of piecemeal, right? Depends on what board you're in, what's offered, what the standard is and that. So to create a standard across the board with respect to education and it was quite intense. Like Tara and I sat on that committee and Hannah, and we sort of went through that document in sections one summer. It was a summertime project. And, there were some common threads, regardless of the section you were looking at, in that. And some really good recommendations have come out of that. And the ministry has had those recommendations now for a while, the final report for a while. And we had talked about considering writing a letter, sort of reminding the ministry that they have this and that they should look at implementation of it, but we hadn't done that quite yet. So anyway, it might be worth asking Donna to come and present and see where they stand on that.
There you go, this is for Eric. But it's just, this comment, because one of the things that as Donna and I are co-trustees, the idea of the updated APOA, we always talk about the changes that are happening outside and then what's happening on the lower level, right? So definitely that's something that we should be discussing, like to make sure there's a match and we're up to speed, so.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't that long ago, we did write a letter to the ministry requesting that they change the definition of a disability so that you're not constantly having to write letters asking for this identification to be added or that identification to be added, that it would just automatically include all identifications, right? I don't think we've received a response. So, anyway, there's something I think we'll have to take a look at it next meeting, so it'll be part of our business arising in the minutes next meeting, and make a reach out to Donna on that. Any other questions with respect to the correspondence? Okay, moving on then to community concerns. Does anybody have any community concerns to bring forward? Okay, excellent. Moving on then to celebrations and successes. Does anybody have any celebrations? I was gonna say, Tara, you gotta have it out.
Got that story. Just for anybody that my son is now 16, good lord. So, and I've been part of SEAC since he was 6. So we've grown up on Adam stories. And this, actually in the last 2 weeks, he has now been independently getting himself up, getting himself dressed, getting himself breakfast, and then getting himself ready to go out the door. maybe a half an hour before the bus is ready to come pick him up, but he's doing it all himself. And I'm like, where's Adam? And then I hear the door slam, oh, he's gone outside to wait for the bus, and that's where he is in the morning, and then, like, I didn't ever think we were gonna get there, and he's got everything, he's got his backpack, he's got his lunch bag, he's got his hat, his coat, he's dressing appropriate for the weather, I'm like, yay, it's happening.
That is amazing.
It is amazing, considering this was the kid that, you know, we weren't sure he was gonna walk, we weren't sure he was gonna do, you know, stuff and talk and things, and, you know, you hear the, oh, well, you know, he'll only get to do this, and, oh, he's showing you that he can, so, yeah, so that's my Adam story this week, so.
Good job, Adam, proving everybody wrong.
I know, right? But please come inside, you're gonna wait for half an hour.
It's not January, so.
No, it's not January, I'm like, well, it's nice, I'll go very fast, I'll wait for the bus, that's fine, but it's still raining, come on.
So annually, the district hosts student recognition awards, where each of our secondary schools nominates and puts forward 3 students for celebration, who have all had interesting journeys in terms of inclusion, accommodation, and just incredible selves. The student recognition night this year is May 29th, next door at St. Clair. And so I would extend that if anybody from SEAC would like a night of inspiration, these youth are absolutely heartwarming and filling in their accomplishments and stories. And so please just let Lisa know. We'll send an email so that you have it written down and a formal invitation, but please let Lisa know if you would like to attend as a member of SEAC. It is just, I've had the privilege of co-chairing the last 2 years and have now passed that we've gone for a 2-year cycle as senior team members are co-hosting. So I'm really looking forward to the night, but this year I don't get a sneak peek at the students, the descriptions of why they're being celebrated. So I'm really looking forward to the 29th, and if you'd like to attend, please let Lisa know. Okay.
Any other celebrations or successes?
It's my birthday tomorrow, that's all.
Happy birthday.
Is that your cake?
Yeah. It's actually what they're trying to like one, so I was laughing about that before.
Oh, that's great.
I was like, we're kind of keeping like I wouldn't care before, so, but it's from the.
Well, and this is.
That's not full service, Lisa.
I know, right? And that's the first thing I looked at, that cake is amazing. And just in case you're wondering, that came again from Melly's.
That's what I said.
Lisa ran out yesterday to Melly's to get us some desserts, and
I love going to Melly's.
I have been telling everybody who will listen to me about Melly's, because I feel like it's such a great place, right? So anyway, our next SEAC meeting is May 25th, 2023. Right here. Motion to adjourn. Elizabeth, all in favor, okay.
Thank you.